Chapter 5 Into the Office. Gary had traversed the entire cat ladder and was at the hub of the crane. He stepped carefully out on the long arm and walked outward toward the end. He was focused and terrified, but the former resolved the latter. He was checking the key points of the machinery to make sure the enormous device would function without fail. This was part of his daily routine, and the inspection required attention the likes of which he very rarely achieved when his feet moved along the ground. His eyes stayed forward as he moved, and they blurred everything beyond the frame and machinery of the crane as he inspected while moving forward. In this situation, he knew there was no time to think of any random thought other than that which was needed to securely move him along the arm and back, and to know if there was any problem detected by his inspection. In the moment, however, he could sense emotions that were linked directly to his environment and his movement through it. He noted a sense of optimism and automatically registered that it came from seeing the city from this height. He felt a freedom that he had come to know was the natural reaction to walking among the clouds and being the height of the sky. He felt a relief and knew that the clear skies and still air, barely a breeze for this height, would allow for quick work that would avoid delays. Just as he reached as far along the arm as he could go, the shifting of the frame reminded him that his grandiose sensation was the foolish result of being distracted from the precarious station he held. And so he held on tight and let the slight swaying of the metal monstrosity subside. He looked down towards the street below, running headlong into what could cause him vertigo, hoping to defeat it brazenly before it could creep up on him. He could see the roof of the Paramount Theater on Congress Avenue, and allowed himself to entertain the memory of seeing the performance of the local musical hero who had been featured in the film a few years earlier. The raunchy rock and blues feel of the music, the predominantly white audience. He spent time being aware of such things, careful not to become a stereotype of a white man who only felt comfortable in groups of other white people. He remembered how strange that felt, a mostly white audience there to celebrate the African-American musician elevated on the stage. He had pondered the significance of that situation and used it to distract him from the sheer terror of the crane's motion. Kinks to the inspection process wrought by the wind were attenuated, and the crane was mercifully still. He remained clinging to the frame of the arm and carefully turned himself back toward the cabin, slowly traversing the catwalk. With his eyes on the encapsulated control area, Gary wondered if anyone going about the start of their day might be looking up to see him, a small and shadowy figure against the morning sky, striding across this mighty moving machine. Looking out to the south, he caught a glimpse of the river and saw a ripple of light bounce off the surface. The rolling motion of the water reminded him that stillness was the illusion, and he need not fear movement. Movement that didn't drop him 28 stories to the ground should be enjoyed, and he smiled at the image of being the man who tamed this metallic beast that perched overlooking the bustling Austin population. Now, at the control station, he opened the door and found his seat where he would be stationed for the next 7 to 9 hours. He took a deep breath, looked about the office and the surrounding area. Precision is at the heart of what he had to do, and so he hit his radio. "Raoul, G here. Maintenance check was fine, in the cockpit, and ready for liftoff." "Aye, Captain. We're back to hurry up and wait. Lift team assembling now. Hold channel 5. The response crackled back almost immediately. There were two things that the education for this station never informed him of. Two very important points that could only come with experience in the station and really could not be taught. This was the first, that the time he would spend waiting for the command from the lift supervisor below would be the most mentally taxing of all his endeavors in this tiny box that controlled the pace at which the structure was built. This tiny box that controlled the livelihoods of all the other workers at the construction site. Having to be in the state of alert readiness was exhausting the first times he had been in the operator's seat. The precise movements to alter the crane's position, the vigilance once he was hauling enormous loads up from terra firma to the scaffolds of the work areas, the constant awareness of important various components and lubricants that the crane was using to function, these points were simple and could be run in the background of his thinking while he was maneuvering the equipment to bring to stoic life the architect's dream wrought through the engineer's mind by means of the workers' bodies. It was in these moments when he was waiting that he would find it difficult to not think about the beautiful intricacy of the workers as an entire system, a single body, diverse in each function, performing with an intended goal the function as a whole. When he did think such things, the kind of things that make a man feel endeared to a specific thought, enjoy the thought and wish to expound upon it, if not record it, for use in some poetic representation of life of these workers who would be invariably, "G in the sky, we need to drop to section 4 on the west corner. Trying to keep the sunrise out of your eyes for the morning lifts," Raoul's voice interrupted. "Copy, Chief. Commencing drop," Gary replied. With no recollection of his previous thought, rambling and poetic as it may have been, he placed his hands on the control decks and blended his essence with that of the machine to allow what others might believe was nothing more than the gyrations and pivoting of a series of well-organized mechanical components, but what he knew as a brilliant dance of modern technology. Once in position, he gave leeway to the powerful set of pulleys that would unwind the cable to allow the hook to descend. As the heavy hook slowly neared the ground, he tried to keep his thoughts focused, and so he worked hard at keeping from his mind the thought he was harboring about Nadia. The fight was not consequential, but the aftermath was poignant for him to ponder. This space, at this moment, was no place for him to indulge his desire to think about something which could give rise to his emotions. He could feel it there, though, and would need to flush it out. Perhaps he was getting the hang of the hurry-up-and-wait game after all. "That's far enough," Raoul informed him, and he ceased the descent, reversing the direction to retract the inches to match the intended spot that Raoul would want the hook to remain dangling over the first lift of the day. He didn't know what the wait time would be, but he wanted to flush this thought from his mind while he had the chance, lest he become more and more agitated throughout the day. Nadia had always been close with her own mother. She was her mother's only child, and the two had a very intimate relationship, which Gary believed was a genuine good. Being one of 3 brothers, he imagined that his wife's relationship dynamic with her mother was different from a parent-child relationship which he knew of, by experience, simply due to differences in gender. He noticed, however, that Nadia had an emotional dependence on her mother, and that her mother seemed always eager to entertain, comply with, and bolster whatever stance Nadia was taking with her own emotional reaction to the world. This would be fine with him if Nadia only had positive emotional reactions toward him. True to being, though, sometimes she did not have positive feelings for him, and instead of channeling them into something constructive, she would talk to her mom about it. This posed a cycle of her negative feelings growing, and would be a terrible occurrence if her mother did not live across the Gulf in Florida. The phone calls would be long, and afterwards Nadia would hold a pointless, by his standard, grudge against him, pouting for days until he performed some act of kindness that she would think of as sweet rather than as an attempt to manipulate her. He was aware of this problem, but he only saw it as a threat once Julia was born. His daughter, his only child whom he loved greater than any other being on earth, he knew was a child, as are the millions of children of the world. She would be the only one like her, and have the privileges that a child such as her, born in Austin into a middle-class family, would have. She would be cherished, but not coddled to the extent that she would not know how to navigate the world. Gary's own younger brother almost fell victim to the overprotective parenting, but Gary and his older brother inspired him to be his own self, to seek independence from the mindset of his family of origin, and to be able to feel without relying on the comfort of acceptance that their mother offered her youngest offspring. Nadia was not simply dependent on her own mother, but her mother made her so with how she raised Nadia. Gary could now see that Nadia was perpetuating that cycle by hover parenting, by encouraging Julia to have her feelings and points of view validated by Nadia. A cycle of emotional dependence that would lead Julia astray from true happiness if it wasn't kept at bay. So Gary encouraged his daughter's independence. He asked her what she thought or what she wanted to do rather than give her choices or tell her the plans that she would perform. Building a skyscraper requires adherence to plan. Developing a healthy and autonomous human requires cultivation of their own curiosity and interests. With prodding her to be her own person within the limited scope that a 10-year-old would be allowed, she became more difficult for her mother to handle. Rather than adjust her ingrained parenting methods, Nadia took to pressing Gary to be the parent who is more present, because he got along with his daughter fine and did not attempt to make her wear a clothing outfit that he picked out specifically for her when she wanted to wear a different one. Nor did he rush to her unrequested defense when she was bumping heads, as he put it, with a peer. Julia learned by his approach how to resolve problems she had socially, angst she felt emotionally, and how to think critically about her own thinking, leading to some innovative ideas regarding her schoolwork and creative endeavors. Nadia somewhat resented him for goading Julia to not require reassurance from her mother. This resentment came out in her response to his work schedule, making barbed comments that he was being neglectful of his daughter during performance of contracts such as this one he was fulfilling. He knew that he was working long hours for what would only be a brief period of time, and that this was how they would stay afloat financially. So her comments were meant to express her hurt over not feeling as what, adequate as she believed him to be? It had hit hard because that was the one point that made him hesitate on these contracts. The fact that he would be about 16 weeks with limited time to spend with his daughter. Time as being an operator for the tower crane was fulfilling, and time as husband was fun. But time being her dad was the best. He was always her father. But dadding, being the person he was with her, that was the time when he felt the most true happiness of being. Nadia, commenting that he was not around enough and directing it at the subject of his daughter before quickly switching to convince him that she, Nadia, would be neglected and she really just wants more time with him, that hurt him. And he was completely aware of how she knew it hurt him. He could remedy the longing of his wife with flowers, notes left for her in the morning, or exhausted yet attentive sex in the night. Yet there was no remedy to his missing the fleeting time of Julia's fast waning youth. There were 2, maybe 3 more years of her as a child in all senses. Adolescence was approaching, and soon her esteem for her father would be eroded as she began to really find her own self. And boys, he didn't dread the notion of her dating, but he was not at all looking forward to the time when he would need to smile and shake the hand of some young daffy dude whom Gary would much rather enjoy pummeling to the ground and removing from humanity's gene pool. The exaggerated thought made him chuckle, and the radio crackled. Load 001 ready for lift. Confirm to workstation 56. That's 56er. Confirming lift on end of message. Confirming destination to workstation 56er. Out. The other aspect of the job that only experience could teach, because if the classroom could, then no one would ever operate the tower crane, became evident as the seemingly sturdy steel form of the crane slightly bent and swayed as it lifted the tonnage of the load.